So, hello and welcome to another edition of Tiffin Talks, a very special one with a very special guest, Kabir Bedi, one of my childhood heroes, and I'm sure a hero to a lot of people out there. He's written a lovely new book, very frank, very candid stories, I must tell, the emotional life of an actor, and with this really handsome man on the cover. Who
Thank
is
you.
this Kabir? Do you recall him? And when you recall him through the book, do you look at him with a sense of fondness or with a sense of sadness, or how do you see him now? That young man, sometimes impetuous, uh, very emotional always, and always very exciting.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you look at him now?
Well, you know, wisdom accumulates with age. So when one looks back, there are certain things one would have done differently, but that's true of everyone.
Yeah,
Um, and with the wisdom of hindsight, I might have done certain things differently, obviously. But that's who I was then, and the person I was then has got me to the person I am today. And I feel it's all part of my journey, a journey that's been intense in many ways, as you read, exciting for a middle-class boy from Delhi who set off to make a career in Bombay and ended up with a career on 3 continents. So, whatever the things that I wish I could have, would have, should have, those are part of the journey, and I don't dwell on them.
yeah. As you shouldn't. I think it's the wonderful things that happen to you along the way, which I think matter. The most exciting thing, of course, I think was your international career. And, this book really gives us an extent of how big it was then.
Right.
We didn't quite understand it at that point because we didn't have the internet and we didn't have social media. But the frenzy was enormous in Italy and indeed Spain and elsewhere.
Across the whole of Europe.
Yeah,
But,
that,
we tend to be America and England focused.
yeah,
We're the Anglo-Saxon tribe. So
right.
we get our news from there, we get our attitudes from there, we regard things that happen there as more important than things that happen in Europe or even our neighbor China. Therefore, that's the orientation of people. So it wasn't easy to convey in those days the kind of success that I had in Europe, which was uh, extraordinary. I mean, no one from India had ever done anything like that on that scale in Italy, Spain, Germany,
Right.
European countries. It was shown in 85 countries across the world. So, I'm not the most sort of the best self-promoter, in terms of immediately getting pictures taken and sent and dispersed, etc. I'm a bit disorganized like that. So, but my career was abroad and I focused on what was happening there. And perhaps I should have broadcast that more in India.
Hmm.
The fact is, India didn't fully understand the extent of my success in Europe, which saddened me a little because it meant so much to me. But at the same time, I've always tried since then to be a bridge, especially between India and Italy and India and Italy, making each country understand each other
Right.
better in terms of the charities I support, in terms of the understanding of India I share when I'm on Italian television and shows. And even the Sandokan series itself was something that inspired many Italians to come, not just to India, but to the East, come to Bangladesh. I meet many Italians across India and Southeast Asia that say, we're here because we got inspired by Sandokan and it changed our life and we got interested and we started a whole new life out here. It's wonderful to know and feel that you have impacted the lives of people in certain ways that have been life-affirming changes for them and put them in directions they normally wouldn't have thought about. So that was a very gratifying feeling.
And Italy has recognized all this with the honor that they've given you and the honor they continue to accord you in
I
the
have
public
been given
domain as well.
the highest civilian honors, Cavaliere, which is the equivalent to being knighted.
Right.
And this is the result not just of my work, but also of the role I played in Indo-Italian understanding. And no country in the world has given me more honor than Italy, and perhaps more love than Italy. because everyone from grandmothers to grandchildren know me in Italy, because the series came and went, but then there were sequels to it.
Yes.
And the original series kept getting shown on television, then on DVDs, now on the internet. So Sandokan and the legend of what I did continues, and whole generations know me. So it's sort of like being a household word in a country. And I think in recognition of all that, they gave me the highest honor, for which I'm really most grateful. I couldn't ask for more.
And by a happy circumstance, your father was in Italy at the same time. That's such an extraordinary coincidence.
It is an extraordinary coincidence. And what's more remarkable is he got there not in the wake of my success, but he went there 3 years before I did. And he was a remarkable man who went to Oxford on scholarship, married my mother, came back, was this flaming communist, and was a friend of Sheikh Abdullah, went to Kashmir.
Friend of Netaji, I mean.
Netaji as well. Knew Gandhi, met Gandhi in Oxford, was a freedom fighter, and then turned to spiritualism and became a great spiritual guru in Italy, because the kind of things he was talking about, you know, the vibrations of everything in the universe, the vibrational healing therapies, the evolution of human beings, those he found more resonant in Italy than here. Here people were more sort of in the Jochi mode, you know. Will my daughter get a good husband? Will my son get a good job? And he wasn't into that. So when the Italians who were sort of on the Dharma Bum trail came to hear him, they said, Baba, you must come to Italy. And he went there for a summer, and he was so thrilled with the reception he got and the way people understood what he was saying, that he stayed on there for the next 20 years of his life. So it was an extraordinary coincidence that here were these father and son who went to Italy with very different reasons, each having success in their own way, living there and being there at the same time.
What do you explain the extraordinary success of Sandokan? What was it in that moment in Italy's history, in its politics, that captured the imagination?
You know, at that time, Italy was going through a great crisis. There were the Red Brigades, the guerrilla group that was terrorizing the Italian state. Economically, things were bad. There was sort of a down mood in the country. And this series sort of was shot in the wide open spaces of Malaysia, the magic of the Orient, this lyrical love story of this Asian pirate who falls in love with an English girl while fighting the British, and yet overcoming all that, you know, and the wonderful. Then the music of the series was extraordinary. Guido and Maurizio De Angelis were young actors young musicians who created this wonderful tune that was actually something people could dance to. It was an epic series, but here you had a theme song to which people could actually dance, you know.
Could you hum it for us?
Sorry?
Could you hum it for us a little bit?
I'm not a singer, but, you know, Sandokan.
Yeah.
You know, and that was an anthem that went around Italy. And it was, and of course, Sergio Solomon, the director, who had the vision of taking these stories written a century ago and weaving them together in a wonderful screenplay, he made sure the film had the look also, you know. He got the Oscar-winning art director of Cleopatra, Nino Novarese, and so the film had this wonderful look. It was just a wonderful escape for people to go into, and there was no traffic on the roads when Sandokan was being screened. It just took over the nation. So people were just blown away by it in a way that it remained with them. And even though it had sequels, etc., what mattered was the original. Even though I've done dozens of films and television series in Italy since then, I'm still always Sandokan, you know, because that's the iconic figure I'm associated with.
Right. And yet, Kabir, when you went to Hollywood, it wasn't as easy as you thought it would be. And I think we also thought that it'd be easy for you. And it's so odd because, you know, you look the part, you don't necessarily look Indian. So one would have thought that there wouldn't have been that kind of racism, which I think a lot of people face. But talk about that experience. You've, of course, talked about it in the book, but talk about it in terms of what did you encounter? Do you think it was a latent racism at that point, even though you looked as if you could be from anywhere?
I was sort of caught, in retrospect, I see that I was caught with sort of double bind. On one
Yeah,
hand, I was Indian, but on the other hand, I didn't look Indian.
exactly.
And therefore, if they wanted the stereotypical Indian, they went to other actors. If there were good roles for Indians, they often painted white actors brown and put them in the role. Um, and that was
Such
considered okay.
blatant racism that was just passed off as, just artistic license.
Yeah, they did that. I mean, they wouldn't dare paint a white actor black.
Yeah.
But brown was okay, and diversity wasn't an issue in those days. So I faced some of that, and it was not easy because you'd go into these auditions and they'd say, "Oh, you're too tall for an Indian," or So I told my agents, I said, "Forget Indian, just think of anything foreign because I don't want to compete with American actors for American roles. So anything foreign," and that's where I got a lot of my roles from. But believe me, it wasn't easy. Even the first film I got was the role of a Tuareg tribesman. I don't look like a Tuareg tribesman, but to Hollywood, that was just a foreigner.
Yeah.
I was famous in Europe, so it was okay to cast a famous European star in the role of a Tuareg warrior. That was fine for them. When I played the thief of Baghdad, of course, I could play I was a prince in the thief of Baghdad. Yeah. That was okay. I didn't have to be Indian for that because I looked, like a prince in the thief of Baghdad. But it was a hard row to hoe. Firstly and foremost, because they weren't writing roles for foreigners.
Yeah.
And that was the hardest thing. Today, it's much easier because far more roles are being written because diversity is an issue. And they take trouble to make sure that diverse ethnicities are cast, which makes me very happy. We fought for this. So I'm very happy it's all coming to a head right now. But for me at the time, it was a difficult journey. And also, staying in LA, I couldn't just stay in paying guest digs. I was a star in Europe. I had to have a certain lifestyle. And so it was expensive. So there were times when my expenses were far greater than my income. And those are things that I had to battle. Plus, I had family responsibilities. I had children to bring up. In acting, the income is always irregular and the bills are always regular.
It was a tough time for you, and eventually, of course, yeah.
And yet, for all the toughness, the fact is, it did get me the James Bond film.
Oh yes,
it puts you in touch with billions of Bond fans all over the world. It's the longest running film franchise in film history. It's got its legions of followers. You get God knows how much mail. It got me The Bold and the Beautiful, which I was on for almost a year.
Right.
It again has its own legion of followers around the world. 350 million people a day watch you and watched me for a year on the show. So suddenly your fan base becomes global as a result of the things that I did in Hollywood. Of course, I did other shows as well. I did General Hospital, I did One Life to Live, small roles in Dynasty, Highlander, Murder, She Wrote, etc. But the fact is, all that multiplies your fan base across the world. That's what Hollywood does better than anyone else, because whatever I do in Europe stays in Europe. Anything I did in America travels across the world. And so Hollywood, for all its difficulty in finding roles, did give me that wonderful platform of fans that still write to me today from all over the world, because they saw me in things that were created in Hollywood.
Right.
And also, Kaveree, I am one of the voting members of the Academy that picks the Oscars. I've been a member since '82, one of the oldest, one of the first Indians to be in that academy. Today, of course, there are many more, which makes me very happy. So Hollywood did give me, for all its difficulty, Hollywood did give me a lot of good things. Not as much as I hoped, I must admit, but certainly enough to write a book about.
Yes, and I think there's much more there that could be a sequel as well. I think there will be, and there should be. But
There are stories to tell. There are other stories to tell.
let's talk a little bit more about Hollywood, because I'm very curious about how in a way, you and Persis Khambatta also, that you write about her, one of your many loves of your life. We'll come to that later. But you opened the door for Indians much later. People like Irfan, who was of course beloved, I think, in America, and now Priyanka, Anupam Kher, Slumdog Millionaire. In a way, you sort of pushed that door open. It was a very tough thing, but you did push that door open. So that journey, I think, also needs a bit of chronicling, don't you think? A little more.
In what way, Kaveree? What?
In the sense that journey of Indians to
Yeah.
Hollywood, to now coming to a point where they can actually play color blind characters. They don't have to necessarily be Indian to play Indian.
Yes.
And look at the number of Indians now, from Mindy Kaling to Hassan Minhaj, they're all over.
There's,
Do you feel that you really were one of the first to do so? And
yeah, and being a first always has its advantages as well as its dangers, because you are making a path through a trackless forest, which other people will follow. But when you're doing that, you have to cut through a lot of foliage and a lot of vines and a lot of wood along the way. So as I said, it wasn't an easy thing to do, because going into audition after audition and not getting the roles was also very hard. And here, I was a star in Europe, and I'm auditioning for these silly roles in Hollywood, not getting them, And what I discovered there was that everybody is expected to audition, except the biggest stars. I'd walk into an audition room and there'd be actors that I looked up to, great character actors all sitting around. There'd be some newcomers as well. And I'd be auditioning against them. Sometimes the newcomer would get the role, or some great character actor would get the role. So you have to prove yourself every single time. What your track record is, they just don't know. And in Hollywood, it's the most insular community in the world, because they don't think beyond Hollywood. The only city of any importance to them, which is New York, is 3,000 miles away. And beyond that, they frankly don't care. So they believe they are the world, and to themselves, they are the world. And there's this immense pecking order, a kind of caste system of who meets who and who can dine with who and who can party with who. And actors are the bottom of the list unless you're very famous, because actors are the ones that need the jobs, and the executives are the ones that give the jobs. So in those terms, it was never easy to make inroads. And even though you might know people and like people, if they don't have roles to give you, what are they going to do? Because nobody's writing those roles. So those are the great difficulties I faced in the initial days. But I actually protested about this. I wrote to Screen International. I said, how can we even stand a chance if roles are not being written for us, if people are being cast who are not ethnically right? But who cared? But the fact is that at the end of the day, whatever we did, whatever we chipped away at, has had some results. Diversity is an issue today. Indian actors are getting work today. And nothing could make me happier.
Absolutely. I wish you could go back and do some more work. Do you think about it now?
Of course, I'm still working. I'm negotiating something with the Italians over later this year. And with the onset of the OTT platforms, all kinds of new opportunities have opened up. And I'm sure that something or the other will come up in the West, in America, or England again. Europe, certainly. Here too, we're talking. So I am by no means retired. The game goes on, the show goes on, and the show must go on and will go on.
Absolutely. I'd like to bring you back a moment to, you filing for bankruptcy. That was, again, a very hard thing that you did, but a very brave thing.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little more about that for people who've not read the book?
Well, I hope they discover that when they read the book, but now that you let the cat out of the bag,
Yes, I'm sorry.
It was,
I won't reveal too much else.
I told you, I had a lot of responsibilities. I had a son to put through college in America. I had alimony to pay. I had a good lifestyle, which I had to support. But I could handle all that. What did me in was the bad investments I made in the stock market.
Right.
And those absolutely wiped me out. And then coupled with other things that went wrong in my life, I was absolutely devastated. And I came to the point where I realized that I just have to file a bankruptcy. And, there's a lot of pride involved in that. And despite all that, even though I just declared bankruptcy, I have never taken 1 rupee, dollar, or pound from the state for unemployment, even though many actors are entitled to it, because I always felt I have to take care of myself. So I could have eased burdens, I guess, if I had gone for state aid, etc., but I didn't. I realized that my liabilities were far greater than my assets. I filed for bankruptcy, moved back to England, and starting from a little hut in a village in England, Nikki, who was my wife at that time, Nikki and I rebuilt our lives, bit by bit, cinematic brick by cinematic brick, and doing a film here, a role there, a television series there, and then things snowballing into more things. And I rebuilt myself and remade myself and brought myself back, which gives me great satisfaction because, when you are down in life, when you are really against the ropes, it's not just your circumstance that is grim, your emotional state also becomes very dark, it pulls you down. And I have always been a very positive person. And it's not easy to go into the well springs of yourself and bring back that positivity and say, whatever has happened, we shall overcome this. I've got the resources, I've got the talent, I've got the drive, and I will overcome it. Because physically, you have bills to pay, people are expecting things of you, you can't live up to those standards, and it's very humiliating. But I think that also teaches you very important lessons. Who's important, who's there for you, who's not there for you, who cares for you, who would you like to spend time with in the future, who would you like to avoid because they were just fair weather friends, all those things. But in the end, you come out stronger, and I regard it with some pride that I was able to overcome all that and rebuild my life and rebuild my finances and rebuild my love life as well. So I'm in a good place, and all that was part of my journey. And for all the pain I suffered, it made for a very interesting book.
Absolutely. And Kabir, now it is indeed. Kabir, now there's so much talk about mental health and, mental wellness. And especially, we saw with the suicide or death of Sushant Singh Rajput last year, there was a whole conversation around that. There was nothing of that sort in that time, was there? I mean, you were really on your own.
You're talking about my son's
Yes.
My son's condition. Um,
because you had to grapple with that as well.
Yes, I had to grapple with that in the middle of it. My son's schizophrenia and how I battled to save him. It was fortunately the beginning of the internet age. So I was able to go online and understand a lot more about my son's condition than I normally would have been able to do so. And I believed that we would overcome this. But dealing with people with mental health problems is an enormous strain.
Oh, yes.
And not just for the person who's suffering it, but for the people around them, the families around them.
Yeah.
The families actually suffer more.
Yeah.
Because they have to deal with a situation that they're not used to. The person that you see is not the person that you knew. Something deep has changed inside them, and they become unpredictable, unreliable, unknowable in certain ways. And there's moments of clarity, and there's moments of enormous depression, and there's moments of immense anger. And family members are constantly coping with this, having to deal with trying to help somebody they love, who, in a sense, is frustrating them at every step. And that is one of the hardest things to understand. I believe medications today are more effective than they were at that time. So I think there's more hope today for people finding a lasting solution. And I hope that's true. Because schizophrenia is one of those ailments that it has no known cause, it has no known prevention, it has no known cure. Doctors look at it like diabetes, manageable but not treatable.
Right.
And I hope with time a cure is found to this, because I personally suffered, and I know so many other families who suffered, people in their families with mental problems. It's not easy at all. But and because it's not just love that you have to give. At times you have to be very firm. At times you're the designated caretaker. You have to make sure they take medicines. And those things create conflicts. And it's really not an easy thing to do. But I do believe that at some level, the people who are suffering from these problems know that there is love for them, know that there is caring for them, know, even though they rebel against it, they know it, they sense it at an unconscious level. And I never forgot that, because that's very important to communicate, that you're there for them, that you love them, that you care for them. And also you must tell them what you expect of them too, because in that state, they often forget that they need to be a little more considerate, they need to be less selfish, they need to be less self-centered. Things change, but it is one of the worst things that can happen to a person and a family, because schizophrenia normally strikes people in their 20s, normally people who are bright, and it comes as a shattering revelation, because at that age, you're about to begin your life. My son was a graduate of Carnegie Mellon University. He was part of the techno elite. He had the greatest career ahead of him in the digital world. And yet he just came to a day when he just couldn't think. And to deal with that is hard. It's hard.
And anyway, Kabir, you were there before. I mean, with Parveen Babi, in a way, you had also handled someone who was, again, at that point, nobody really understood what she was going through, but you had a sense of that.
Yeah.
But again, it was such a difficult thing, because there you were in the public eye, both of you.
Yes.
And everything that you did made news, and sometimes not for the right reasons. People didn't understand what was going on. And you've written about it with great deal of honesty and integrity. Would you like to talk a little about that period of your life, which was wonderful, glamorous, but also heartbreaking?
Yes. Well, for all the glamour and all the success that we were having and that I had in Europe, etc., the fact is, Parveen had her problems, had her issues, and she was aware of them. But she was very afraid that if the word got out on that, the industry would abandon her. Therefore, she didn't want to see doctors. She wouldn't even talk to my father, who was a healer. She just wanted to go into denial as far as the medical aspect of this is concerned. She felt she could handle it. And it was tragic seeing this beautiful, sensitive, at times extremely caring, enormously loving girl suddenly transform into this frightened creature, or angry person, or unpredictable person that was unknowable. But the fact is, if you love somebody, you want to protect them, you want to be their protector, you want to care for them. And when Parveen left me and then came back to India. Um, when Stardust knows reported it, say Parveen Babi has gone crazy. The story spun was that she'd been so wrecked in her breakup with me,
right,
unhinged her. Terrible things were written about me. But the fact is, as I've shown in my book, she was the one who left me and didn't let me help her in the ways that I wanted to. And yet, the tragedy is there was a beautiful, sensitive soul in there, and a very talented girl. And yet, her mental demons were haunting her, and in the end, destroyed her life. And as I showed, we were sort of in touch even after that, in strange ways. But down to my last meeting with her, this problem she had kept rearing its head. The last meeting I had with her was a few years before she passed away. And I met her at the Holiday Inn.
You haven't written about that.
Hmm?
You haven't written about that, the last meeting.
Yes, I did in the
Oh,
Parveen.
you did. Okay, I missed that. Sorry.
Yeah, I met her, and she'd come back to India and she'd accused Amitabh Bachchan of being a drug dealer
Right.
and being a CIA agent and being a gangster who kidnapped her and all that. And when I met her, I said, she said, "So nice to see you, Kabir," and I was delighted to see her again.
That's right.
She was obviously not looking as beautiful, as slim as she used to be. She put on some weight, etc. So I was disturbed by that. But, she said, people think I'm mad. And I said, well, everyone has their own opinion on madness. And she looked at me and said, you also think I'm mad, don't you? You're one of them.
Yeah.
I want to see you again. You are one of them. You think I'm mad too. And I said, Parveen, listen, she didn't want to hear it. It was the last time we spoke. And I walked away with great sadness in my heart because I really wanted to be able to help her in some way. But, the paranoid mind takes over, and then you're seen as the enemy, and that is the end of it. And that was the last time that I saw her alive. Of course, I was there at her funeral, and together with Mahesh and Danny, we
Yeah.
her to the grave, as three people who had loved her in her life, each in their own way.
It really is one of the saddest episodes, I think, in Indian cinema history. She was so wonderful. And she was on the cusp of international stardom. I mean, you'd got her a role in the Sandokan, and that got you into all sorts of trouble.
Of the heroine of the next Sandokan. Yes. But at that time, various things were taken over in her mind, and her film here became a big hit, and she
Amar Akbar Antony.
Amar Akbar Antony became a big hit, and I think she just chose the certainty of success in India rather than chancing it abroad in my shadow. And she left a very good role, and she caused enormous disruption for me by leaving that role 20 days before shooting was to start.
Absolutely.
So there was all that I had to deal with. But I don't want to get too much into this because people could also have something to read in the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's more to read in the book, and these are like the things on the surface.
Yeah.
I regard this book as an emotional experience because it was very emotional for me to write it, and I presume it evoked emotions in you when you read it.
Absolutely. Because all these things were things that I read in old pages of Stardust and Filmfare and Star and Style. But to actually see what happened, to read what happened actually, really brings it back home and sort of tells you what the public perception is not necessarily what was going on, And I think that's very important to know. Also, I think that whole image that we had of the Juhu gang, all of you were so cool and were so...
The Bohemians of the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. I think you captured that very well as well. You capture both the the sort of the aspect of the swinging 60s and 70s, but also some of the conflicts that some of you had, under the surface.
Yes, but it was a wonderful age. I mean, the 60s was the age of the Beatles, who, as I wrote
Oh,
about,
yes, you begin with that.
how I managed to interview the Beatles as a young reporter.
And I have to say that the most disturbing thing, and I can understand why you're angry, is that AI got something recorded on that tape. It is so annoying.
It was,
and later you gave Doordarshan,
yeah,
you gave Doordarshan Sandokan and free.
I gave.
And, I mean, it boggles the mind.
Excuse me. Yeah. So, that's what happens with bureaucracies at times. I have, they let me down in many ways, but at the same time, they did give me my start in life. So for that, I have to be grateful. The basics of film that I learned was doing this show on Doordarshan television, Mirror of the World, where I learned my film basics. Then I came to Bombay and made advertising films for 5 years with Lintas and Ogilvy and Matha as the film chief. Yeah. All that stemmed from my early days at Doordarshan. So there are things I have to thank them for, but there are also things they let me down enormously on, which I have written about. So as I was saying, the 60s were this wonderful time of a new freedom, a new society, flower power, the Beatles, rock and roll music, and it created a whole thing. And then the 70s were this kind of, again, the sense of sexual freedom, the sense of enjoying nature, communing with nature, thinking about different types of societies being created. We were always very politically active, and also there was a whole spiritual dimension to it, because I never met Osho, but I knew every one of his celebrity followers, and I had enormous respect for him. And then I was a great listener, I won't say listener, well, you can't be a follower of Jiddu Krishnamurti because he says, don't be a follower. But Jiddu Krishnamurti, all these religious teachers, and then my interest in Buddhism coming from my mother, who became the highest ranked Buddhist nun in the world. And all those spiritual factors, political factors, social factors, the advertising world, the theater world, the film world, all these things come together in the 70s for me. And that's where what was the springboard from which I ventured into the world. It was a very exciting time, very exciting time.
And of course, you met Protima Bedi. My favorite part is when she says, what is that thing? when you first meet her, looking for the golden key.
Yeah. I met Pratima because I was bursting to pee and needed to get to the executive loo. Right. That's one of my favorite stories.
It is. It's a lovely story. I don't want to give away so much, but your spiritual journey also sort of goes along with your cinematic journey, and I think that comes obviously from your parents and what all the ideas they introduced you to. So how do you see your spiritual journey, and how did it sort of help you overcome all these many troughs and highs?
Well, Kaveree, I have various spiritual streams running through me. There's the Sikh tradition from my father's side, because we are descendants of Guru Baba Nanak. And even though my father was a philosopher in his own right, with very original thoughts, he always revered and bowed his head before Guru Baba Nanak and his teachings. In fact, he wrote 2 books on him. Then there was my mother, who was always a seeker. She was always seeking all her life, because when she was a little girl, her father was killed in the First World War. And her mother was an avid churchgoer, refused to go to church again. She said, believe what you like. So little Frida, my mother, would go into these churches in Derbyshire and sit there and wonder about life. And that curiosity remained with her for the rest of her life. So when she came to India and joined the freedom struggle as one of Gandhi's handpicked satyagrahis, that curiosity about religion continued until she found Buddhism. So Buddhism was also very much a part of my lineage, if you like. then there was my own curiosity. And I was listening to Krishnamurti on the lawns of the Constitution Club in Delhi, listening to him at the JJ School of Art in Bombay, going to private gatherings at the house of my friend Asit Chandmal, listening to him, meeting him in Ojai many years later and continuing the discussion. Because he was what I call he was like a spiritual laxative. Huh? He got rid of all the beliefs that were in you and said, now start and tell me what the answers are. You find them for yourself.
Right.
He gave you the answers, but he cleared the board. He cleared wiped the blackboard clean.
Right.
He said, he just divested you of all your existing beliefs. So there was Krishnamurti, then there were a lot of great teachers I met along the way. Meditation has always been part of me since I became a Buddhist monk in Burma. And so that again promotes your inner journey. I've always been surrounded by spiritually curious people. So spirituality has always been a very important part of my life. I don't consider myself a formal member of any organized religion, but I have taken much from many religions, and particularly in the Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh tradition, in terms of my core beliefs. And there's things I believe in, there's things I don't believe in. I mean, I believe in reincarnation. I don't believe in destiny.
Yeah.
I believe in free will. All those kinds of things. I've explored that. There's a whole chapter of my beliefs in the book.
It's lovely.
And that is part of my journey too. And that's why I put it in the book. I think it'll be of interest to a lot of people to know what I concluded at the end of my spiritual journey, although the journey still continues.
Yes, I think there's so much more that we can talk about, but then we'll have to talk all night. But really, I think just sometimes when you meet your old friends, the old Juhu gang, Mahesh, Bhatt or Danny, Shabana in a way also I think was part of it. Do you sort of have, sit back and remember the days, or you're all very focused on the future?
Well, what happens in the film industry, I've found not just in India, but everywhere around the world, when we are doing projects together, we are together. And we become a family. And then the film ends and we join other families and people move on. So, of course, there are relationships that have been very close, especially the relationship I had with Mahesh. There are people that I regard very close to me at various stages of my life. But then, we all get into different orbits. Yeah. So we don't meet as often as we used to, although we keep a certain digital communication going to say, I still think of you, I still care for you. And we keep talking about meeting, which never happens, because everyone gets involved in what they're doing. And then there are occasions that happen, especially in the film industry, certain film occasions, and then you get together with people, and then it's like you never left off, as though you met them yesterday. It might have been 3 years since you last met them, but it's like you pick up where you left off and you talk as though we were having a swim on Juhu Beach yesterday.
In sun and sand. In sun and sand.
In sun and sand or on Juhu Beach, because I still live on Juhu Beach here, and there's a lot of memories associated with that beach, of all the things we did and all the things all the conversations that we had there that led to all kinds of people doing all kinds of things and believing all kinds of things. I remember Satyadev Dubey on the beach in Juhu once seeing a plane, the light of a plane flying in the night, and he thought it was a UFO, and he ran after it and said, "Take me with you, take me with you."
I think that's a lovely note on which to end this.
Right.
But I hope you're not going anywhere soon, and we see much more of you on screen, on OTT, in cinemas, and I'm sure we will. There's someone out there writing another Sandokan, I think.
Seeing it, and I'm certainly raring to go both here and abroad. on
Yeah.
projects that interest me and thrill me. I have to say how sorry I am for the people that suffered in this pandemic. But by the same token, I must say it gave me the time to write this book, and I put myself into it wholeheartedly. And this pandemic has been one of my most creative periods. And I wrote a book I've been wanting to write for many years, and I hope you like what you read.
Oh, I do. And I recommend it to everyone. Kabir Bedi's Stories I Must Tell, The Emotional Life of an Actor. Please do read it. Kabir Bedi, thank you so much for talking to us. It was such a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you, Kaveree. Thank you so much.
Thank
Love you.
Thank you.
Bye.